Formula 1 began in 1901, when some men were bored in an old part of France and sent cars round a track really fast. Well, really fast for the time. Nowadays, your Nan Citroen would probably be a better race car. Fast forward to 1950 and it's officially called Formula 1. Then skip a few years, toss in some regulations, add a few rules, and a metric shit ton of money, and we have the 2023 Formula 1 season. Now, if you've clicked on this video, you're probably wondering how it all works, and it's good news because this is the idiot's guide to Formula 1.
Life could be a dream, life could be a dream. Shaboom.
Now, the main part of Formula 1 is of course the race weekend, and over the course of the current season there are 23 race weekends, and these are split into 3 days: Friday, Saturday and Sunday. Now, you can define these days by the events that take place on them. Friday is practice 1 and 2, Saturday is practice 3 and qualifying, and Sunday is the race. Or you can define them like this: Fridays are for the sweaty nerds, Saturdays are for the more interested casuals, and Sundays are for everyone. Unless there's a sprint weekend, but we will get to that mess later. So what are these sessions all about? Well, the 3 practices are all 1 hour long and give the teams a chance to prepare their cars for the race. Now, this is important for the drivers and the teams, but it's not actually that impactful to the fans, which is usually why only the hardcore F1 nerds watch these sessions. Now, after practice we have qualifying, which will set the starting grid for the race on Sunday based on how fast they can set a single lap. Qualifying is split into 3 parts: Q1, 2 and 3. In qualifying 1, the top 15 drivers progress to the next stage, with the bottom 5 being eliminated. Then qualifying 2 is the top 10 drivers going through, with the bottom 5 being eliminated. Then finally Q3 is a shootout between the top 10 to see where they will start on the grid for the race. And then on Sunday we have the race. A race is 305 Ks, usually lasting between an hour and a half and 2 hours, where the teams will usually pit once, maybe twice depending on the track, and they will only pit for tyres after refueling was banned because apparently setting drivers on fire isn't good. Now, I mentioned sprint weekends, and they work a little differently to a regular race weekend and are probably subject to change, but in the current system they work like this. On Friday there is a standard 1 hour practice and then a qualifying for the race. Then on Saturday we have a sprint shootout qualifying, which is the same qualifying format as a regular weekend, but a bit shortened. Then on the same Saturday we have the sprint race, where it's a 33% length race and the top 8 get points. And then on the Sunday it is business as usual with a standard race. Now, these sprint weekends can be hard on the teams, but they usually do provide a large amount of entertainment for the fans, making it very difficult to judge whether it's good or bad for the sport.
Life could be a dream, life could be a dream. Shaboom.
Now, speaking of the teams, there are currently 10 teams on the grid, each with 2 main drivers and 1 reserve driver, who will be used in a couple practice sessions or when the main driver falls ill. You can define these teams into 3 kind of groups: the top 4, the middle 4, and the window lickers. The top 4 consist of Red Bull, Aston Martin, Mercedes and Ferrari. Now, these lot are the ones you expect to see at the front of the pack. Like the big 6 in the Premier League, these lot are the ones you expect to win the races, be on the podium and win the championship. However, sometimes you can be surprised by the likes of the middle 4, more commonly referred to as the midfield. Now, the midfield are a highly interchangeable bunch, but this season it consists of McLaren, Alpine, Alfa Romeo and Haas. Now, these lot you expect to be fighting in and around 9th and 10th, not really anywhere up the field, but sometimes they may sneak a surprise podium or even a win, but these are once in a blue moon events. And finally we have the window lickers. These are the ones who are usually stuck to the back of the pack with the occasional top 10 finish here and there. And just like the midfield, these lot are also interchangeable, but for this season we have AlphaTauri and Williams, and the latter have made an unfortunate habit of being towards the back. Now, some teams have some sort of relationship with one another, however these won't affect them out on track. In short, these guys like these guys these guys like these guys, and these guys kinda like these guys, but it's a bit more confusing. It's basically high school all over again, and considering it doesn't really affect on-track performance, it's best not to think about it. Now, each team has a choice of engine suppliers because they don't all make their own engine. Because, no, that would be too simple for Formula 1. Currently, we have 4 engine suppliers on the grid, which may change by 2026, but that's a whole different story. Right now, we have Renault, Ferrari, Mercedes, and Honda, with Renault powering Alpine, Ferrari powering Ferrari, Haas, and Alfa Romeo, Mercedes powering Mercedes, Williams, and Aston Martin, and finally Honda powering Red Bull and AlphaTauri.
Life could be a dream, life could be a dream. Do, 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 shaboom.
So how do these teams and their engines win championships? Well, each race, points are handed out with a maximum of 26 being available per driver and 44 per team. So how do they get these points? Well, each of the top 10 drivers gets a number of points. First gets 25, second gets 18, third gets 15, fourth gets 12, fifth gets 10, sixth gets 8, seventh gets 6, 8th gets 4, 9th gets 2, and 10 gets 1. You can also get an additional 1 point for whoever manages to get the fastest lap in the race. However, you can only get this point if you finish in the top 10, because reasons. So what do these points mean? Well, after the 23 races are done, the driver with the most points is the World Drivers' Champion. And the team with the most points are the Constructors' Champions, which is seen as slightly less important than the Drivers' Championship, but still important nonetheless. So what happens to the teams down the bottom? Well, absolutely nothing. There's no relegation or promotion for the teams in F1. However, if a driver performs below their team's expectations, they may be replaced. Unless Daddy owns the team, because the drivers don't have to be replaced. There's no rule stating which drivers you can and can't have, unless one of them decides to commit an act of terrorism or their country invades another country.
Life could be a dream, life could be a dream. Do, 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 shaboom.
So how do these teams beat each other in races other than just being a better car? Well, they use strategy, and strategy in Formula 1 is kind of complicated. See, in Formula 1 there are very few ways to gain an advantage with strategy, with the main way being with your tyre strategy. There are 5 tyre compounds: soft, medium, hard, intermediate tyres, and full wet tyres. During the race you have to use 2 different compounds, and have to make at least 1 pit stop, unless the race is wet, but we will get to that later. So what are the differences between the compounds? The soft tyres are fast but not very durable, the hards are durable but not as fast, and the mediums, as you guessed, are somewhere in the middle. The softs are most used during qualifying because their 1 lap pace is the best. They may sometimes be used in races, usually at the beginning to be aggressive with overtakes or at the end to get the fastest lap. The mediums and hards will be the tyres you will see most in the race, with most races this season seeming to require only 1 stop, which is essentially start on the mediums, drive till they no longer have performance, then pit to hards, or vice versa. Pit stops often take around 2 to 4 seconds, and during these you can also replace your front wing if it has been damaged. This brings the time of a pit stop up to around 8 to 12 seconds. Now the pit lane has a speed limit of 80 km an hour for the majority of the tracks, but is slower on certain tracks for, again, reasons. So when drivers come into pit, they will lose a certain amount of time, so pulling a driver into the pit at the right time is crucial to having a good race. Now there are 2 main tyre strategies you will hear during a Formula 1 race, which are overcuts and undercuts. Overcut means you pit later, which usually means you think you have more performance in your tyre than your rival, and can get ahead if you stay out longer. An undercut means you pit earlier because you think you can get ahead of your rivals on newer tyres. However, if you undercut, your tyres may be more used up later in the race compared to your rivals. Strategies are usually decided based on the first few laps and how the tyres are performing in the current conditions. Weather can also play a huge part in the strategy, as if there is rain on the way, it might be better to wait and pit onto the wet tyres when the rain starts to fall. So what happens when there is rain? Well, that's what the inters and the wets are for. Intermediates are when there's a little rain, and the wets are for when there's a torrential rainstorm. Kind of. Because if there's too much rain, the race will be stopped. Or maybe it won't be. Who the fuck knows? Depends on how many drinks the stewards have had. Anyway, how do the stewards stop a race or warn the drivers of dangers? Well, in F1, there are a series of flags that can be shown to the drivers to warn them of upcoming hazards. Green, fucking go for it. Yellow, someone's had an oopsie. Double yellow, someone's had a mega oopsie. Red, lots of cars have had mega oopsies. Blue, move over, you slow bastard. Black and white, stop being a dickhead or stay on track, you bastard. Black means get the fuck in the pits. These will be waved by the orange fellas and fellies. Now that can't be right. We're just going to say fellas is gender neutral. And these fellas dressed in orange on the side of the track wave these flags so the drivers know what's going on. There's also little lights that you'll see flashing as well. But I guess we still have the flag fellas for tradition. But flags aren't the only things that can be used to control the drivers. There are also safety cars and virtual safety cars. Safety car means everyone piles up behind a road car with yellow flashing lights and drives at a much slower pace. And then the virtual safety car means everyone on the track is slow to a set pace, meaning no one gains or loses time to another car. However, the interesting part about safety cars and the red flags, and lesser the virtual safety car, is that they can be used to change strategy. Because all the cars are slowed, that means a pit stop loses teams less time. Meaning, cars will often pit during a safety car, changing up their strategy for the race. During a red flag, cars can change their tyres without anything happening to them, as they all remain in positions they were in before the red flag.
Life could be a dream, life could be a dream. Shaboom.
Now, you may be wondering how all these rules and flags are enforced. Well, if you break one of the rules, which can be anything from leaving the track too many times, or jumping the start, to driving backwards, or if you ignore certain flags, you will be given a time penalty, or on the rare occasion, a drive-through penalty. Drive-through penalties are usually handed out to people who speed under virtual safety cars, or jump the start, and that just means you have to drive through the pit lane and you can't pit, essentially slowing you down one of the faster parts of the track. Time penalties are usually given out in increments of 3, 5, 10 and 15 and so on in increments of 5. The amount of time given on a time penalty usually depends on the severity of the incident. Corner cutting or leaving the track usually gets you anywhere between 3 and 5, very rarely can be 10, but that's only if you really screwed the pooch. Stop and go time penalties can be served in the pits, which means before your pit stop, your car is stationary and the mechanics can't work on it for the length of time your penalty is. Other time penalties may be applied after the race and impact your finishing position, which has happened on occasion this season, with Carlos Sainz really feeling the brunt of it.
Life could be a dream, life could be a dream. Shaboom.
Formula 1 goes to 23 different tracks this season, and each one has a unique look and feel to it. However, one rule for every track is that it must have a 90-degree or more corner as part of its first few turns. Speaking of tracks, and you will usually hear them referred to as two different types of circuits: street circuits and permanent circuits. Street circuits are races held on roads that are used as regular roads when not in use for Formula 1, and permanent circuits are tracks that are only used for racing. As a viewer, you will see that street tracks are commonly much thinner and have a lot more walls, while permanent tracks are more open with more runoffs and gravel trap areas, which are used to slow the car down if you fuck it, pretty much. Another thing you'll hear a lot of is the mention of DRS and ERS, and they have some technical names, but basically, DRS does some aero shit and makes the car faster in a straight line in certain parts of the track when you're less than 1 second behind another car. Is that overly complicated? Kind of. Does it make sense the more you watch it? Yes. ERS also makes the car faster, but this time it uses electricity and can be activated anywhere on the track, but you only have a limited amount of it, which can be replenished when drivers are not on the throttle during braking or coasting.
Life could be a dream, life could be a dream. Shaboom.
Each team can only use a certain amount of components per season, and if you go over the limit of a certain part, you will get a grid penalty, meaning you will start a certain amount of places further back, depending on what you have replaced or how much you have replaced. And if you replace a large amount, you could even start from the pit lane. Each team has a number of members, some you will hear, such as the driver's engineers, who will feed them information during the race, and team principals, who control the teams and, all the things surrounding that. Others you will just see, like engineers and mechanics in the garage, or the pit crew, who are also engineers and mechanics who've just worked out a lot. This is Max Verstappen. He is very good and will probably be winning the majority for the rest of the season, so get used to his face and the Dutch national anthem. This is Lewis Hamilton. If you're going to speak about him on Twitter, make sure it is positive or you will be mauled to death. This is Ferrari. I'm sure you've all seen them before. If you have a friend who loves Formula 1 and they are a supporter of Ferrari, every Sunday just give them a text, make sure they're okay, because they're probably suicidal. And finally, the most important thing you can do to learn about F1 is just watch the races as much as you can. The more you watch, the more you will learn. This video can help. Trust me, just watching the races will make it so much better. Pricing is probably an issue, so I don't know, watch it through your neighbour's window. Now, I have probably missed some things in this video because I have a smaller than average brain, so let me know anything I may have missed in the comments. In a bit. Holy cunt bags on a river.